I'm Atta, a London-based coffee startup entrepreneur. Over the past few months, I've been converting a Ford Transit van into a mobile home and coffee business with the goal of being completely independent and free to travel and earn as I go. This week, I secure my first market pitch while suddenly realizing that I have to make a very expensive purchase in order to start trading, and share with you how I cup my unique blend of hand-roasted coffee. I have now secured the market. Cupping is basically a consistent and uniform way of tasting your coffee. It's just so hard. So what you're saying is that because despite the fact that I have a gas safety certificate, an electrical safety certificate, public liability insurance up to £10 million, that because I converted the van myself and because I didn't have it converted by a quote unquote professional van conversion company, that your director isn't willing to accept my application to trade. Hi, it's Atta from Bean Extract. We spoke last week. Yeah, no, I sent an email with all of the company details. I just wanted to make sure you got it and roughly when I can expect to hear back with a decision about potentially trading at your market. Great, okay, perfect. Well, I look forward to hearing back from you later today, yeah, we can sort of iron out the finer details. Great, thank you so much. All right, bye. Cool. Well, that sounded quite promising. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Oh, perfect. Great. Well, I've just had an email from the first market to get back to me, and they have invited me to come and trade at their market. So I'm just going to fill out the updated application form. Now I've got loads of things to think about now, but yeah, that's such fantastic news. So that's my first invitation. It's been 3 weeks of calling out, and you know, it's not easy, especially in this time with COVID and all of the restrictions. It's that's such a relief. It's just what I needed. I was really starting to feel it, you know. 3 weeks of hearing no's, and you know, especially this week as well. I had a really difficult start to the week where a company that shall remain nameless, you know, were just very, very difficult with me. You know, they were somehow trying to insinuate that this van wasn't appropriate to trade, and you know, they were caveating it with, you know, oh, we don't mean to offend you, but, and it was offensive. You know, how can it not be offensive? They're essentially saying that, you know, somehow it's some bodge DIY job when I've had it all approved, had all the safety regulations met. It was very upsetting, to be honest with you, and quite stressful. But you know, it's part of it. You know, you have to sort of take a professional view on it. You have to go, ultimately, it's one director of a company taking a view on another director of a company, and ultimately, if they don't wish to trade with me, I have to take it as their loss, you know, because I know that I believe 100% in my product. I know that I believe in my level of service, and if they don't want to partner up, or, you know, then ultimately that's their decision. I have written a letter to the director trying to encourage him to take a different viewpoint. If I hear back, I'll be very pleased and very surprised. But you know, I've got another marketplace that does believe in me, and I'm going to keep reaching out. I've literally scratched the surface of how many different markets there are in the UK, and so I've just got to keep ploughing on. Ultimately, as I said, I think it was last week or the week before, you've just got to have that mindset where you're ploughing through that sea of no's to get to the island of yes. Suddenly it's dawning upon me that I have all these new things to worry about, because one thing that I've noticed is that with this marketplace in particular, I will need to supply my own energy. So I do run the coffee machine off gas. That's possible, and the grinder will be able to run off of the batteries within the van. I may need to invest in a generator this week, which is a huge expense, but it's going to be good for so many different things with regards to both the business and van life, especially now that we're moving into winter and the efficiency of the solar panels is going to be quite heavily reduced with rain and shorter days. So yeah, loads of new things to consider, added financial pressures, but these are good problems to have. I'm quite impressed with this one, and it's quite like fast delivery. It's just the price. I mean, oh my god, it's just so hard. It's weird, like I've got my first marketplace, and it's just stressed me out so much because I've had to think about so much in one go. You've only got a certain amount of budget and time and resource, and you're only one person. Yeah, it's so overwhelming. I mean, I am still really excited and it's a good kind of tired and a good kind of exhausted, but you just get to the point sometimes when you're so tired. Just like, oh my god. Okay, so I've ordered my first ever generator. I have now secured the market. I will tell you which market it is going to be closer to the date, but for now I'm going to keep it under my hat a little bit, and it's quite well known. It's very central. Apparently some celebrities do attend this market as well, so very, very excited to be collaborating with them. I've just had an email back from my local council. I supplied a massive envelope with all of my documentation and my proposal to start street trading in my local area. They've got back to me and they've said that a lot of the documents were good, but I need to come up with a full business proposal in order for them to initially consider my request. I've never done a business proposal before, so I have to research how to create one, and then I've got to basically, it's a bit like a business plan, but it's you're essentially pitching an idea. So I've got to research that. I've got to come up with an entire document, so that's going to take all day, I think. If I can secure a local street trading pitch in my local area, that would be fantastic, because that means I've got a secured place every day. I can go park up and trade within my local area. Today we are going to be doing some cupping. Now, cupping is a systematic and consistent way of preparing your coffee so that you can perceive all of those nuances, all of those aromatic flavors and characteristics of your coffee. It's not hard to do. You can do this at home. You don't necessarily need specialist equipment or anything like that. As long as you have a kettle and a grinder, then you can, and preferably if you've got some scales as well, That's all you really need to get underway. Everything else you can sort of find around your house. I'm going to be comparing today my last roast of Bean Extract's original blend with another roast that I did a little while back, to make sure that the flavor characteristics between the two roasts is consistent, and so that I'm delivering a consistent product that is going to satisfy my customers and make sure that they know what to expect from my blend. The number one rule with cupping is consistency. So you need to make sure that you're treating one batch of coffee exactly the same as the other. That comes down to your grind setting. It comes down to the amount of water that you're using. It comes down to the steeping time. It comes down to the weight of the amount of coffee that you're putting in. So you've got to make sure that those variables are all consistent, and that way you know that any differences between these two roasts are going to be down to the way in which they were roasted and the roast profile, and not anything to do with the cupping. And that way you can go back and you can make adjustments and you can tweak things and you can make sure that you have that level of consistency. It's really important as well to make sure that you take loads of notes while you're doing this. With cupping, you also want to consider your brew strength. So if you have access to specialist tools like a TDS device, you want to be setting that to between 1.15 and 1.55 with an extraction of about 18 to 22%. Those are the usual norms, but I won't go too heavily into that for this video, because I want to keep it really accessible to everyone at home who wants to try this out. It's recommended that you do cupping like 1 or 2 days after you roast, so that you get as fresh a flavour of the coffee as possible. So there are 4 main stages to the cupping process. The first stage is the dry aroma and the fragrance of the coffee. This will give you an idea of the freshness of the coffee. You're going to have the most volatile aromatic compounds with the lowest boiling points that are going to give you that real wonderful aroma at the dry stage. You have the wet aroma. So that's when you initially introduce the hot water to the dry coffee beans, and you want to smell that as quickly as you can. That is at this stage, this is where the coffee is going to be releasing the most amount of aromas. You're going to have the most profound aromatic experience. You're going to have all of those hundreds of compounds being released, and you'll be able to sense them through your nose, and you're going to have a very rich experience. At the wet aroma stage, if you can smell vegetal aromas or savory aromas, that's usually a telltale sign that something may have gone wrong with your roast profile. Potentially you've underdeveloped the bean, or potentially you haven't introduced enough heat early on, and the center of the bean hasn't consistently roasted with the rest of the bean. So this is a fantastic stage to really start seeing the quality of your roast and how it compares with the consistency of previous roasts that you've done and how they marry up. What I'm going to do is grind the coffee beans now. You want to make sure that your grind setting is medium fine, and you want to add 10.0 grams to the cup, and we're going to be combining that with 170 grams of water, and that's going to make for the perfect ratio for cupping. I've got my most recent roast and my last roast. So the first step is for me to smell the dry aroma, and this is, I'm going to be picking up on the fragrances of the dry coffee. Oh, really nice dark chocolate, vanilla. Yeah, delicious. I'm getting subtle charred flavor profiles as well for that more nostalgic flavor. Now, the reason why I have 2 cups for each roast is to make sure that I'm also testing for consistency, because it's one thing, you know, you make 1 cup, but is it going to make a consistent cup every time? Some roasters will do up to 5 cups, but for a small operation like this, 2 should be enough. Yeah, I'm definitely getting a bit of nuttiness as well, a little bit of walnut. The reason why I'm tapping it is because I'm making the granules of coffee just jump into the air slightly, and that's going to release those aromatic compounds. I'm going to measure the water and make sure that when it reaches 96 degrees, because it's just coming down from the boil now, when it reaches 96 degrees, I'm then going to introduce 170 grams of hot water to our blend. So I'll just tear the scale so it's at 0, and then basically I'm going to set a timer as well. So you might have heard about something called a cupping spoon. You don't need to go out and buy a specialist thing if you're just doing this once or twice at home. A nice soup spoon or something with good curvature and good depth will do just fine. Start the timer now, and I'm just trying to get all of the coffee grounds nice and wet. Okay. I'm just smelling it straight away, straight after that pour. Lovely. Getting that wonderful acidity, orangey, really nice aroma. Now I'm not going to leave it too long. I'm going to pour the other one. In cupping, your nose is actually doing most of the work. Your tongue can detect the 5 tastes, so bitter, sour, sweet, salty, and umami, but your nose is capable of detecting thousands of different aromatic compound combinations. So it's really important when you're tasting to make sure that you're using your nose as much as possible, taking slow, deep breaths. It's just got to 4 minutes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break the crust, which is using the back of my spoon. I'm just going to push the coffee away from the infusion, and I'm going to smell those wonderful aromas. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely remove that crust, and then we'll come on to the tasting. The best way to remove the crust is to use 2 spoons. It's just coming up to 9 minutes now, and you don't want to taste the coffee really before 9 minutes. Really, you want to taste it as hot as you can take it, so that you can get a full appreciation for the flavor. The ideal temperature really to start tasting is around 60 degrees, because that's going to be ideal for you to perceive those flavors. The other thing to bear in mind is when you're tasting it, you want to, this is not a time to be polite. Much like wine tasting, you want to slurp this coffee, and you want to slurp it as vigorously and really suck it into your mouth and get as much air mixing in with the coffee as possible, because by producing those aerosols inside of your mouth, they're going to promote that retronasal olefication, which is basically delivering those aromas up to the nose and to the back of the mouth, and that way you'll get a real full mouth experience, and you'll be able to really properly appreciate all of those aromas and flavors to the best of your ability. If you're only tasting 1 or 2 coffees like this and you're comparing it, it's okay to swallow some of the coffee. This will get the coffee to go over the taste buds at the rear of your mouth, and also it will again add to the retronasal olefication, which will give you a more fuller picture of that coffee. If you're trying several different coffees, say up to 6 different coffees, then you probably have a spittoon next to you. Very caramelly. It's lovely. Toffee. Getting that dark chocolate. It's like very subtle charredness. It's like date, prune, nice fruity, very, very subtle fruity profiles. Really nice balance between the blend. It's important to remember that the aromas and the flavors when you're cupping come as a combination between the inherent characteristics of your green bean, as well as how you roast that bean, so the roast profile. When you're cupping, it's up to you with your experience to discern where those flavors and aromas are coming from and to separate them. When you're cupping when the coffee is hot, that's the best time to evaluate the acidity, the brightness and the sweetness balance, as well as other elements of the coffee aroma and profile. Once you've allowed it to cool down to room temperature, you can then start to evaluate some of the more subtle traits within the coffee. For example, you can establish whether it has more of a grassy profile, whereby you can establish if you've underdeveloped it with your roast, and whether you need to go back to your roast profile. So it is definitely worth waiting and letting it cool down to room temperature, and then doing the tasting again to make sure that you can pick up all of those subtleties, and make sure again you make lots of notes so that you can then go back to your profile and make sure that your roasts are matching up and you've got a consistent product. These are all at room temperature, so I'm now going to taste them again and make some more notes. So I'm really happy with that. I really, I think that between the 2 roasts, they're virtually identical. There's almost an imperceivable difference between the chocolatey and caramelly notes is just slightly stronger on this roast, but I'm absolutely happy with that. In terms of the quality of the roast, there's absolutely no vegetal, no sort of grassy, hoppy flavors, nothing like that in the bean at all, which is brilliant. That means that I've had a nice even roast, and I'm really happy with that. But in terms of the signature characteristics of my blend, everything is there. I'm very happy with the overall quality of it, and I'm happy to start boxing these up. So ultimately, what I'm doing here is ensuring that my product remains consistent and to the best of standards that I can hold it to, and make sure that it's a product that I'm pleased with and that I know my customers will be happy with. Whether I'm at events, markets, weddings, parties, when you come to taste my blends that I've roasted through my interpretation of the extraction of that roast, you are tasting something I've created. But ultimately it's important to remember that this is a creative process. So if you were to buy my coffee beans and take them home and extract them yourself, whether it be pour over, whether it be for espresso, or whether you want to use an AeroPress, it's up to you ultimately to experiment with your own different forms of extraction, your own different brew ratios and brew strengths, and create a coffee that's going to be unique to your preferences. You can't get wrapped up too much in the numbers and the science, because coffee is very much an art as well as a science, and so it's up to you to experiment in your own time. You can see I'm not using anything too out of the ordinary here. You can easily do this at home, refine your taste buds, and practice these skills so that you find out what your favorite kind of coffee is, and you can enhance your coffee experience, and hopefully you can have the best coffee experience of your life. And that's, for me, that if I can encourage you to do that, then I've done my job as a roaster, as a barista, and as a coffee lover, because ultimately I just want you to find fun in the experience of preparing your coffee, and also just have a really wonderful experience tasting it. That's all we can really hope for when we have our coffees. As I say, if you like that, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next week.